sometimes the strongest thing you can do is lay something down. And that's in my, in this sort of, I guess you would call it second or third act of my life. That's kind of what I've learned. It's sometimes the pursuit of something isn't as hard as actually letting go of something.
That's so relevant to my life.
I get it, though. I get it, because we're taught, like, don't ever give up, man, and I'm all about that. I'm all about adversity, and there's certain things that I've seen through and walked through. I'm glad I didn't give up now, I look back. So it's a weird balancing act, isn't it? And no one can tell you. You sort of have to walk through it on your own.
Yeah, I mean, don't ever give up, but a lot of people may see pivoting as a failure. You ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
What is up, everybody? This is Joe Adams, and welcome to the Relentless Pursuit Podcast. What we do on this podcast is bring in guests from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, to share their journey and everything along the way that led them to where they're at today. We're here to make an impact, and that is what we do. So if that is for you, like, subscribe, all those amazing things. And if that is not for you, I don't know what your problem is, but it's time to jump on board today. Thank you. But without further ado, I would love to introduce today's guest, Mr. JP Williams.
Good to be here with you.
Man, it is awesome to have you. It's an honor, just thank you for making the time to come out.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I know
Sunday.
We've been trying to make this work for a little while, so I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, well, it didn't really match up, for some time, but I think, timing is everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it worked out beautifully, like you said, just location-wise.
Yeah.
And for those, so y'all know, I spoke for my first and only time at NTSU last year. I think it was November.
Yep.
And JP spoke as well, and I found a lot of inspiration in his story, and I was like, I need to get that guy in the studio. And, of course, things didn't pan out for the last several months, but stayed in touch and reached out, and here you are today.
I'm so glad you reached back out, for sure.
Well, I'm honored to have you, JP.
Yeah.
I know you got a lot of things going on, and you're an important man.
I wish. No.
But JP, I love your story, and without giving, we'll take it back to the start of the journey, right?
Yeah.
But just introduce yourself, tell everybody what it is that you do currently in your life and what you're about, and then we'll take it back.
Yeah. So I'm JP Williams, like you mentioned. I'm currently a mental health coach for a mental health platform. And so I get to work with people at Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies all over the country every day. And it's just been an amazing journey to have been on the last several years. I know we'll kind of back up even more to kind of bring a cohesiveness into the story, but that's currently what I'm doing, along with performing original music around the country. I'm still doing that. So I come from that world before I stepped into the mental health world, personal development world. But that's what I'm currently doing. Yeah.
I'm excited to, dive more into that as well. So
sure.
That's amazing stuff. And obviously, I think that's one of the key components of this show is the mental health aspect, personal growth. I mean, that's so important to me, especially in a world of, that's just, I don't know. There's a lot of debate back and forth and
polarization.
You see that on a lot of shows, and not to knock any, but everybody's got their thing.
Sure.
But I think people nowadays, it's so easy to get lost in all the chaos, like, who are you? Because there's so many different definitions of what you could be nowadays. And
that's the truth. Everything's very fragmented.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so a lot of people are lost. And so something that like really helps them grow personally can help them identify, who they are.
Sure.
Yeah. So, all right, JP. Well, let's take it back. Let's take it back to the young days of JP.
Yeah.
Where do you hail from? And walk us through that journey a little bit.
Absolutely. I was born in Clarksville, Indiana, which is right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky, which is where I spent the first 5 years of my life. But I was born with retinopathy of prematurity. And so up to the age of 10, I only had sight just in my left eye. I've never had sight in my right eye.
Okay.
It was limited, but I was able to ride my bike and watch TV and, do a lot of things in the neighborhood. I was able to see colors and so I know what things look like, which has been very helpful to me in my individual blindness journey. I don't rely too much on being able to see because, that would be counterproductive in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it is a good reference point. When I walk into a room, even though it may not be accurate, I can at least, the world is very tangible to me visually, and I can sort of like walking into your studio here. It may not be accurate, but I have some kind of reference point. And then when I hear you working on your computer over there, working on your cameras, I can develop a map somewhat in my head. And so that's one way that I think being able to see has been helpful. And then, much later in life when I started writing songs and painting pictures with words, that was very helpful as well. Although I do know of a lot of wonderful songwriters who are blind who've never been able to see that can still paint pictures, but I've just been able to use my past as a tool.
That's
to
really
help me
cool.
out. Yeah.
I think so you just have this extremely keen sense of hearing too, but you also got like that reference, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the hearing aspect of things, or people have often asked me, are your sight senses heightened at all? Because you can't see, and I think they aren't heightened, but I just can. I just use them a little bit more. So I'll use my hearing when I'm walking down a hall independently with my cane, for instance. Like a hallway will open up, and I'm supposed to turn right here. And so I have something called facial vision, where I can feel sound waves bouncing off my face, so to speak, and I can kind of hear when things are in front of me or beside me, which is helpful. I went hiking with a group of guys yesterday, so that actually came in handy because we were walking down, and I was like, oh, what's to my right or to my left? And so you can kind of hear, or if we're walking and say there's a tree coming up, as we're talking, I can go, whoa, there's something to my left or to my right. So it can be helpful at times.
That's actually really cool. I don't know why I thought like a bat with their
Yeah, no. I mean,
kind
blind as a bat. That phrase, because they can't see obviously, but they use sound waves to know how to get around. So I definitely don't have that level of facial vision as a bat, but but I use what I got.
Hey, I love it. That's so cool. I mean, you got to learn how to adapt at the end
Absolutely.
of the day. That's really the only option.
Yeah.
You see people learn how to do things. Maybe, obviously they can't speak or whatever the case is, or they can't hear.
To adjust.
So they have to adjust in like different ways.
Adapt. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild. So growing up, I mean, so you were born with that. Were you obviously you're into normal activities, because you learned how to just see with that one eye, right?
Yes.
What kind of things were you into? What was your family structure like and everything as well? What are some influences there?
No, it's a great question. So I have two sisters, one older sister, she's 7 years older than me, and then a younger sister is 4 years younger. And so I'm the middle kid. And then my parents were together up until I was around 10 years old. And then they separated and ultimately divorced. And now they both, my father actually passed away last year, but he remarried, and then my mother remarried. And so, that was kind of what I experienced around 10. And that's around the time actually when the vision in my left eye started to fade. So I went in to get checked out, and again, retinopathy of prematurity is what it all stemmed from. And they looked and they said, well, your retina, that vision is continuing to fade. So we're going to go in and try to save what you have. So they went in and did a surgery called the sclera buccal surgery, which I think they still do today, whereas they try to save what retina is left, for someone. And in my case, it didn't hold, and the side in my left eye didn't return, and then it led to glaucoma. And so 10 years old was a tough year,
Yeah, of
and
course.
And then a year later, about my parents divorced, and so it's very interesting. I never really thought about it being a traumatic time because it's just my journey and I didn't know any different, you know?
I'm curious about how that maybe shaped your identity and your outlook going through that at 10.
That's a really good question. I think, you know, when you're so young and when you go through hard times, that I think, and I believe also, you know, my parents, everybody was just kind of in survival mode. I believe, you know, my parents' marriage was falling apart, and they were needing to get away from each other and start anew. So I think everybody was just such in a survival mode, including myself, and so it was a lot of kind of silver lining it. You know, there's a purpose for this, which I think, you know, that was a coping mechanism back in the day. You know, there's and even stepping into more spiritual or religious aspects around it of, you know, God's going to do something great with this, or,
Yeah.
you know, which now I, you know, however people need to go through their journey, it's everybody has an individual path. But for me, looking back now, it's like, oh man, you know, it would have been awesome if, and we did the best we could with what we had back then. But it would have been awesome if we could have leaned more into the brutal facts of the situation where, you know, you're blind. This is our reality. Now, how do you become the best blind person you can be, rather than, you know, you need to still be like the other kids. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of kind of resistance to, or maybe the perception of what we had at the time of being a blind person was like, we want to avoid that. And then, you know, so I think back about that time, and you know, that's why acceptance is in my coaching business is something I work with people a lot on a pretty regular basis. Is, man, you know, the sooner, and it's not linear, you know, to get to that place of acceptance, but as soon as you can get there, it's always a better place to be. You know, the brutal facts of reality. A lot of times we want to avoid those because we don't want to feel pain or discomfort, and that only, ironically, causes more pain and discomfort.
Isn't that crazy?
when we're trying to avoid it, you know? Yeah.
It goes back to a quote. I mean, I brought this up several times, but there's a shirt I had that says, comfort is a slow death.
It really is.
You know?
It really is. Yeah.
Adversity, you know, at the time you didn't face like the level of adversity that you do as an adult, right? Like, especially as you go through things, and, you know, heck, me over the past several years, right? Like, I've faced a lot of adversity, and I've learned how to handle adversity better through that, right?
Absolutely. It's like a muscle. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the time this was your adversity, and you hadn't faced much prior to that. So you were just like, it was a lot. It
was a lot. And, you know, it's interesting because I'm not ashamed of my age. You know, I'm 49, about to be 50 here in January. And it was just a few years ago, I was at work and, you know, in my mid 40s, and finally had the thought like, wow, when I went blind, that was, you know, my parents divorced that year. That was a traumatic experience, you know, going through all that. That was the first time it was weird. It was like a download.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a physiological response. I mean, you know, it wasn't like the heavens opened and a light came down and, you know, it was just a really natural release of, oh, this is that's what that was. And to be able to name that was really helpful.
Naming your shadows.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And that's part of that acceptance journey of, you know, that's there again is not linear, and everybody has to go through it in their own way with whatever they're going through. But yeah, that was kind of a recent, enlightening, natural experience.
It's powerful when you have those, especially in older age. It's like, oh man, like,
yeah, all this time, what have I been fighting or afraid of? You know, and what we're so afraid of is not so scary after all. It actually is healing.
Yes.
You know, because we know what it is.
Healing's difficult though sometimes because you have to face it 100%. But it's also like what comes from that, if you're willing to do so, is such a beautiful thing, and it can change your life forever, and the lives of those around you, and you know, maybe your kids or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, and it makes you more authentic as well. You know, and I think I wondered about that too. You know, did you ever, I think at that age, you said something about being like the other kids, just try to be like them.
Yes. Obviously. And that worked into my adulthood as well.
Yeah. So, and so this question is perfect for it. You know, I guess, the pressure to perform strength rather than live authentically.
Absolutely.
Was that a pretty big theme?
Yeah, and I think, that's something, I think our culture a lot of times, I mean, I always want to take full responsibility as much as possible, but our culture is like, you got to be strong. You got to, never give up, and, and all these things. It's like Rocky, which I love the Rocky movies, by the way. I'm a huge fan, but it is a movie,
Yeah.
But
There's a lot of truth in movies sometimes.
Yeah, no, true. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is lay something down, and that's in my, in this sort of, I guess you would call it second or third act of my life. That's kind of what I've learned. It's sometimes the pursuit of something isn't as hard as actually letting go of something.
Oh man, that's so relevant to my life.
I get it though. I get it, because we're taught like, don't ever give up, man, and I'm all about that. I'm all about adversity, and there's certain things that I've seen through and walked through. I'm glad I didn't give up now, I look back. So it's a weird balancing act, isn't it? And no one can tell you. You sort of have to walk through it on your own.
Yeah, and I think the key from my perspective is, and maybe I think I'm following what you're saying 100%, but let me know if this makes sense. Anyways, the key there is like, I mean, don't ever give up, but a lot of people may see pivoting as a failure. Like a year ago, I had to move out of that building that I told you I was in, I would have looked at it as failure, but I was in a totally different place mentally, right?
Yep.
And so fast forward to now, I just saw it as like, oh no, this is a pivot to go in the direction that I need to.
Absolutely.
That's okay. Rather than, keep pushing forward in a space that like, hey, that was the forge, right?
Yes.
And so same thing. It's never quit, but pivoting's okay too, as long as you move forward.
Yeah, because businesses change. Like I spent a lot of time in the music industry and with a publishing deal, and in that industry, as you know, I'm sure you have friends in that world. It's like, I mean, what it was like a 180 the last 20 years, 10, 15 years in that world.
Yeah.
It's like how music is monetized, and if you stay loyal to the way it used to be done, it can be detrimental because that doesn't exist anymore. So, but a lot of people think, man, I've got to stick with this way of doing things or I'm failing, rather than, well, maybe I should look at how this could actually be a benefit to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's continuing on with music. Sometimes it's, well, what's over here to my right? What could I do over here that I could still carry out or honor that value of creativity, but maybe it's not solely music. Maybe it's things along with it. It's such a challenging journey. Dreams are weird. They are so, and there's not one story that's the same, I mean, unless you want to become, let's say, and thank God for them, but doctors, like, okay, you go to medical school, you focus in on this particular type of practice or this medicine that I want to practice. And then ultimately I go through these steps and man, I'm a doctor,
Yeah.
Which some paths in life are like that. And I'm glad that people have gone down that road, but a lot of paths are not, especially in the creative world. It's just it's a non-linear road path to walk down.
Yeah, I think it's learning how to, because I got things I value, right? I got things I hold to a certain standard within myself. Mm-hmm. And how do you grow? How do you succeed? How do you evolve with things without selling out almost?
Yeah, I know. How do you be open?
There's a fine line though.
Yeah.
It's it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming because you want to make the right moves. Man.
I know. It's a lot around identity too, just how we see ourselves, and life is tricky.
It's very tricky, but it's such a beautiful thing.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about the experience, and then you can reflect on it and just see all that if you're willing to do so.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a cool correlation with your journey, being blind,
mm-hmm.
but also I don't know, like I was thinking of like titling this episode, right? And I'm like, you're blind, right? But you still see so much beauty in things. Like that correlation, like you can visualize it all just as well or even better than a lot of people. Does that make sense? Like you can paint the picture
absolutely. Like there may be a misconception that when you don't have one of your senses that you're not as deep as the average person or something. I mean, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
Yeah.
and it's like, no, it couldn't be further from the truth. We've all been through something. It's just that my adversity is just more noticeable.
Yeah, 110%. But I mean, you moved through it with grace, I've got to say. I mean, you impressed me when I saw you speak, and I was like, you obviously you spoke well and you delivered your story well, and then you pulled out a guitar and started jamming out. And I was like, this is awesome. Heck yeah.
Cool.
It's
Thanks.
such a wholesome, powerful journey. So I love it, and we're just kind of diving into it.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we shift into the next part of the journey, I do got to ask though, what has been maybe the biggest internal battle now that we're talking on these kinds of things?
Sure, I love this conversation.
Have you learned how to maybe coexist with it?
Being blind or just being human?
Just internally. Yeah. Maybe, and then maybe touch on the blind aspect as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, more so internally, just being human.
Well, it's interesting because we attend a church called Sparrow Day.
Okay.
Now, and it's a very progressive, inclusive church. And one of David Perez, one of the things he says, and I may be paraphrasing a little bit here, but the more human you are, the more spiritual you are. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, and I'm not saying, that to me really spoke to me, because it's like, wow, because a lot of environments, it's all about how to become less human, whether that be through a substance or that be through even, we could even use the Bible or any kind of religious text to try to back away from our humanness, that we need to become more spiritual and holy. And sometimes, man, the most impactful thing we can do for ourselves is just to let go and just go, wow, I'm feeling anxiety, but that's okay because I'm human. And the only time I'm not going to feel anxiety, as far as I know, is when I die. So I don't want to feel like a dead person. So, anxiety, sadness, also, joy, the whole gamut.
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel all that, I want to feel all the ups, the downs. They're so important, and we're trying to, I think a lot of times, not feel those things. And that makes me really sad. But I spent a lot of my life through, whether it be through a dream, through a substance, through religion, trying to feel less human, and it's weird, but I think I was just kind of going on what culture or what circles I was around at the time were telling me, and affirming me. But now it's all about that, and I'm not there yet at all, but that's the kind of circles I want to be in. I just thought that you said it before, authenticity of being human, that we're all fighting, and that we want to buffer a lot of times, I mean, I've done it, believe me. I mean, I don't want to feel anxiety in this room with these people, so I'm going to do whatever I got to do to kind of numb myself, I mean, I've been there, and I'm sure you've got your journey with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know you do, but so it's just, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, 100%. I think you're always, I've talked about it recently with a friend of mine, just ripping off the masks.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're never there.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's the beautiful thing, is like, I'm probably going to be tearing off masks till the very end.
Yeah.
But
It's so
authenticity is like a life growth. You never like at that full level. I don't truly believe. I think there's always something to peel away.
Yes.
And so, but I guess the more mask you have on, the more you are connected and intertwined by those social norms.
Yeah.
That you feel less human. But the more mask you pull off, the more disconnected you are from them certain circles. Does that make sense?
So you're saying it's certain, like you pull the masks off, and maybe maybe a certain circle that you were in before doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people are like,
your energy changes, or just
the conversations change and everything,
and you see things differently. You feel things differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
yeah. No, I totally, I've been there and kind of gone through, me and a good friend were talking about this recently, like mourning what I was, and mourning, more importantly, in his words, mourning what he thought he was, but perhaps.
Dang.
And
Yes.
that really jumped out at me because the way I see myself could be vastly different from the way you see me. Or
Yeah.
maybe my wife sees me, which weirds me out, actually.
Yeah, it's a weird concept.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, at least she thinks you look good, so that's a plus. But you said something about being less human, and I think it goes back to the comfort is a slow death thing. Like people kind of get in their bubbles and they feel comfortable there.
Yeah.
And not to knock them, but maybe they go to the same church, it's the same structure, but they go throughout the same throughout their entire life.
Yeah.
And they find peace and comfort there. And I'm not knocking it necessarily. I'm not much of a believer in that. I believe we should always, I think life isn't meant to be comfortable.
Yeah.
It's an experience and we're here to maximize it.
Yeah.
But by maximizing it, you're going to go through adversity and pain, and
Sure.
your emotions are going to shift. Your beliefs may shift, all different kinds of things. You're going to break away from conditions that you've had your entire life as you experience more and more and more. And that makes you more human as well. But also because if everybody's doing the same thing for their whole life, I think that's robotic.
But you kind of get, again, back to the human part, why we do that. Because our brain, even that's why I feel like that's why people stay in toxic situations. It's the familiar that it's almost like a false sense of safety. So the brain will say, "You're safe here. You know what to expect." Well, even when it's toxic. And so to break away from that, and you mentioned it when I walked in, you're sharing your story about the unknown. And how scary that is, and that's why a lot of us, and I get it, don't step into that unknown. Don't try a new career path. Don't leave a town that they've grown up in. Which nothing wrong with staying in the town that you've been raised in. I'm just saying, that's we like the predictability, of life, and also nothing wrong with someone who decides to stay in a career for 30 years or 40 years. I mean, good for you.
Yeah.
If it works out. But sometimes life has a way of thrusting us all in certain times into the unknown. And it's scary, We'd all like to stay where we were a lot of times just because we know what that is, even if it's bad for us.
Yeah. I mean, my spiritual path has changed, like over the years, and I've had to face a lot of conviction with that too, especially being in the South.
Yeah.
I just believe in like my ancestral ways, I tell people like the old gods, the old ways, right? That gives me purpose. That's, spiritually, I look at things from, I've said this in a couple podcasts, but say the mountain peak is God.
Mm-hmm.
I look at JP, he's over there on a different trail, but we're heading in the same direction because I've understand like the eternal truth is love. That's the one thing that's how I believe it. It all is God that we're seeking
leading us towards that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like
I agree.
I just got what connects me with that. And I've had people say things I've had to defend myself a few times, right? But if I believe and I believe, I'm just walking that path, right? But I think that's the thing. It's when you step off living in the South, when you step away from, maybe the church, right? It can be something that tests you a lot, because people will judge and come at you about that stuff.
Yes, I totally agree with what you're saying. Sometimes we're in these communities and it may be good for you to step away for a while or maybe forever and just say, man, I wish you well, but I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
In order for me to keep growing, I've got to step onto this trail. I got to turn right. You're going to keep going left. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to go right here and I wish you well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I contend, and I have on occasion been known to become kind of neurotic towards friendships that maybe I don't have in my life as much, and almost like, did I do something?
Oh, yeah.
Are they judging me? And meanwhile, they're just living their life too, and they're trying to figure it out too. So it's been nice, like my wife actually named it for me. She was like, I think you're being a little neurotic, And I was like, I think I am. And it was there again, back to naming stuff. And people are living such fully dimensional lives that they're not thinking about what JP's doing, So I might as well go where I feel joy or where I feel happiness. When I feel this over obligation towards a person or a group of people that honestly, they're so busy thinking of their own lives.
Yeah.
So that was kind of freeing to me.
Yeah.
To be at that place. And that doesn't mean we're not still friends or that I don't still care about certain people. It just means that I'm heading in a different direction.
Oh yeah.
Moment,
100%. I mean, I've faced that with friends that,
Sure.
I took on my business all in on top of having a wife and a new daughter. Right. And that time I can't give it to them. They're just, I don't have it like I did. Unfortunately,
for this season of time.
For this season of time, but they don't see it that way. It's just that like, I don't care. And it's just been like, man, like that's never been the case, but I'm doing everything I can, but maybe, they'll reflect on that or something. That's not for me to choose, but I love them the same regardless as when we hung out more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we all have seasons of life. I mean, it's not a straight, target. I mean, it's kind of zigzags all over the place.
Exactly.
And it's not forever.
You said something too that I found interesting because you were talking about breaking away from what's comfortable, and you were going through what you did, losing your sight fully at 10 in the midst of your parents getting divorced. The fact is they still chose to get a divorce in the midst of that.
Sure.
When they could have do what a lot of parents do, like just stay together for the kids. But then a lot of people do that for 20 or 30 more years but they're unhappy in that. They had to do, I don't know. At the end of the day, like them to split was best for them.
Yeah. And that stuck with me too. Like I think of that time and I'm really happy for them that they made that choice for themselves, because I would hate to look back on and go, well, they stuck in there, they hung in there and gritted their teeth through it for me or for my sisters. And I'm glad it was now that I look back, life fell off script in a lot of ways back then, but that actually taught me that life doesn't have a script and it's random and things happen. Curveballs are thrown our way. And so I learned that lesson. Sorry, I hit the mic there. I learned that lesson at such a young age.
Gosh.
I
love that line. Life doesn't have a script.
It doesn't.
Man, I mean, I'm going to reflect on that one.
Yeah, because we think, we go to high school, potentially college, we get married, we have a career, yada, yada, yada. But really, I mean, that's, I think, was a really, really good lesson for me to learn at a young age.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. When I was in high school, I thought that's how it was all going to play out. And my life has not been that way at all. And it's funny to think about it because it's been so extremely different. But
I have this plan in place. Like, and it's the illusion of control of,
everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
So there's diving into your story. So after that happened, obviously you went through what you did, like trying to be like the other kids. I guess at what point in time did you kind of break free from that, or start to break free from that?
Well, I would have times of going like, okay, I'm going to use my cane now. I'm going to really get into reading Braille on a more regular basis. And then I would have to fight that. It was almost like I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But, so I was in public schools up to the age of 17, and then I went to the Tennessee School for the Blind here in Nashville for 2 years, and got all my credits to go to college. Went on to college and majored in music and minored in psychology. And so I was able to, because of the school here in Nashville and Donaldson, I was able to do that. I was able to move forward. So I think that was a good...
I used to drive by this. I used to live up that way, drive by there all the time. Yeah,
absolutely. And so I think that, as late teens, going, man, if you don't accept this and learn the tools, it's going to only hold you back. I didn't know that then, because I was too young to know that then. But now that I look back on that period of time, I'm like, wow, what I was practicing acceptance in a really authentic way. I mean, if I didn't do that, I wasn't going to get my credits. I wasn't going to sharpen my skills, which then helped me when I finally did go to college and then into my adult life. That resistance of what is, that resistance of who I am, part of an aspect of who I am, was only going to hold me back.
Interesting.
And limit me.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So like moving forward from then, like I just want to hear a little bit more of your story before we kind of revert back to some of these concepts.
Yeah, so I went to after attending the Tennessee School for the Blind, I was able to move on and ultimately graduated from UT Chattanooga. But a lot of the tools I learned at that school I utilized in college. And while I was doing that, I started playing in bands locally in Chattanooga around town, and started to enjoy that and actually being able to make some money here and there to pay my bills when I was going through school. And then after school, I was intrigued by the Atlanta area and just what was happening there musically, and how a lot of musicians are able to make a living, playing music. Whether you get famous or not is, I don't know, but that's always kind of random. And but I knew, I thought, well, maybe I could go to Atlanta and actually make a living. So I did that for a number of years. And while I was in the Atlanta area playing a lot of bars and clubs and restaurants and that kind of thing, I started getting really intrigued about the writing aspect of the music business.
Mm-hmm.
So while living in Atlanta, I would take a Greyhound bus. I would hitch a ride with a friend, but I would come to Nashville, here in Nashville, once a month to just write with whoever I could write with. I had a small collection of people that I had contacts, relationships with, that would let me crash on a couch, or I'd get a hotel room or whatever. But I was still making money playing music. And then I went on the road and did the indie artist deal in the Mid-Atlantic, Mid-America regions, played a lot of colleges. And but more and more, I just started gravitating towards how do you create something out of nothing and then it becomes intellectual property?
Yeah.
What is that? And then, just dreaming about, wow, the best job in the world would be to work for a music publisher, and you go in and you actually imagine for a living, you're able to make a living. So I moved to Nashville in 2006 and was in town and knocked around town for a while, and then landed a songwriting deal on Music Row. And I was there for like 7 or 8 years, and ultimately eventually started, got some cuts and was part of a song that did well.
Well, I do want to ask, before you get to that point, I do got to ask a couple questions.
Yeah.
Going back to 10, I guess the music aspect, what was that a part of your life then? Like, what was
no.
What role did it play in that transition? No? Okay. So something you took on later.
Yeah, it was. When I was in junior high, they offered a guitar course, and I started a guitar class. So I got into that, and then there was voice teachers that would come to the school, and you'd get out of doing schoolwork for like 20, 30 minutes once a week. So, hey, that's cool. And I was interested in singing, how do you become a better singer? And so I got into voice and guitar lessons when I was around 14, 15. And then it was after I moved to Chattanooga that I started, you're affirmed at things you're good at, and so, I would show up at different things at school or maybe at a friend's house, and, suddenly I'm not the blind guy anymore. I'm just one of the guys, one of the other kids just playing guitar. So it always gave me common ground with people.
Yeah.
It broke down walls.
Yeah.
Music always did that, and still does to this day. It's really something I still get to. I was at a friend's house the other day. We were around a fire, and a few of us brought a guitar, and, just got to play the old standards. And wow, if that's all it ever is with me moving forward, that's huge.
Yeah.
So I still it still does that. It's still a wonderful tool to this day to just break down walls and get to know people.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thinking on that, it sounds like it's been, that you embrace that fully and it opened up a lot of opportunity. But I guess being blind, were there challenges that you had to face as being a blind songwriter? Were
Sure.
people different? And I guess maybe how'd you navigate the industry and build those connections?
Yeah, looking back, it was kind of one phone call at a time, or an email, or or walking in one door at a time. And once I landed at a company, they would set up co-writing appointments for me, and then I would have my own network of people. But I would either go to their company or they would come to mine. And so yes, obviously there's going to be people when you have something unique about you, maybe there's misconceptions, and sometimes people come in and they're not comfortable, or maybe, or maybe they've just had a bad day,
Yeah.
has nothing to do with me. But ultimately what always won was just having a great idea, and you're not going to have those every day.
Yeah.
But when you have a great idea in the room, that breaks down walls. It doesn't matter if I'm blind, they're sighted, whatever. It's all about just getting a great song. So, but yeah, I don't think that would be the music industry. I think it was just the world in general. Anytime you have a unique aspect about yourself, some people don't care from day one. Some people can't get over it, and they just have their own misconceptions, and that's fine too. I mean, that's hard, when you're like, man, I wish this, but there again, get back to the tool of acceptance, right? If I can accept, okay, they're just never going to get it. Then you can just move on and not keep showing up and wishing, like, I wish this group of people would understand me more. Maybe if I hang in there more, and then it's not my responsibility.
It's like, yeah, you can try to fit the mold.
Yeah.
And sure, if you do that, like, opportunities may arise.
Sure.
But then if you embrace who you are authentically,
yes,
then the right opportunities will arise.
Absolutely. And it may be and for people out there that, like, man, I don't want to walk away from this community or this collection of people. There is a dry spell where you have to, it's almost like you're in this light spot of the forest, right? And you walk away from that light and you just walk and walk and walk and kind of in the wilderness for a while. And then you find another light, but you have to be able to hang in there and not go back.
Yeah. And then also, go ahead.
It's kind of a weird picture that I just kind of thought of, but that's sort of what it felt like,
Yeah.
Like, in a lot of ways, going through a religious deconstruction and then, changing my, how I engage with music. And there was a time there where it was like, wow, where is my community? Where do I, and it is so tempting to go back, even though you've changed and maybe they've changed and you're growing, it's hard. It's a challenging thing.
I was thinking about, like, I was in that last relationship I told y'all about earlier, I was like, oh, well, maybe I need to be more like this to get opportunities. I was looking at getting tattoos removed, and like, it was, I was trying to change who I was.
Yes.
And a long story short, like, I was like, no, that's not the key. That's not the answer. And, I've been led to where I'm at now. But even then, and this goes back to, like, the self-rejection, the value and all that.
Sure.
But, looking how I do, right? I got a mohawk. I got tattoos on the side of my head. And, like, I don't fit any kind of mold. I just kind of do my thing.
Yeah.
And you wonder, like, well, maybe if I go in this door, people are gonna be like, nah, like, what, you look like this, or you believe in these things? Like, I don't want to do business with you.
Mm-hmm.
But then once somebody told me, they're like, Joe, if you just walk in with that passion that you have, people are going to feel that, and they're going to want to be a part of it,
And you're being authentically who you are, right? And that, I think, builds trust with people.
Yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, I've seen so many opportunities open up just from guests,
Yeah, absolutely.
on here. So it's the same thing for you. I think you just embraced who you were, and you were passionate about what you did.
Yeah.
And that opened the doors for you.
But I will say, the thought of there again, that part of me as a child wanting to be like the other kids.
Yeah.
I think that held me back a lot when it came to co-writing, being on Music Row, because I wanted to be like everybody else. And that, I think, really held me back. And if I could go back to myself, 15 years ago, I would say, don't do that. Just be who you are. And maybe that consistency, maybe a door does close, but maybe that's a good thing.
I'd say,
rather than being inside that environment and trying to be something that you're not. I don't know.
It's hard to tell, there's so many factors.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say, yeah, you could go back to that, but now you've got the opportunity to share that perspective with others.
Yeah, exactly.
And impact that, right? And I think that's that lasting legacy type stuff.
Like, that was my lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then create that value for others not to make the same
because
mistake.
Because I think, especially Music Row, for instance, you see people, you look around and you look at the big writers at the time and go, wow, maybe I need to start writing the way they're writing.
Yeah.
That they're already doing it. They've already got those, the system doesn't need another so-and-so. It needs you and what you do. And maybe that means, you don't have a publishing deal anymore, and maybe that means there's always sacrifice, but it's always a healthier road to go down because at least it's real, at least it's something that's honest.
Gosh, I love that. I freaking love that because it's so, what I do is a creative thing too. It's
of course
it's its own, like, you know what I'm saying? So Absolutely. I'm always creating. So it's so relatable. Like, I'm not writing music, but there's so much connection there to my journey as well. So you're giving me a lot of insight as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's why we're here. That's why we're communicating.
Of course. And, but you kind of were getting to a point to where you wrote a hit song.
Yeah. So myself and Josh London and Jimmy Allen, we wrote a song called Best Shot. Jimmy Allen was the artist at the time, and he recorded it, and it was a 3-week have song, and it was wild. This was a wild experience because, I had this deal for a long time and got some cuts, but didn't have the big single. Still, swinging swinging for the fences when it comes to when it came to that. But I was just at this point in life where I was like, you know what? I have been in town a long time. I gave it my best swing. I really did. I mean, I really was like, maybe I just need to lay this down for a while, come back later. So for the first time, man, I packed up the guitar. I mean, I remember it vividly and just put it in the closet and just thought, again, this doesn't feel like giving up because I really got all my questions answered.
Yeah.
And then like 6 months later, the song went to number 1. So it's kind of a beautiful story that I wouldn't trade.
Yeah.
It's like, you hold on to this thing for so long and you dream about this thing for so long. And then I released it and call it chance or whatever. But for me, my experience, I can assign meaning to it. I can make it mean whatever I want. Right.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, that's a good lesson to, maybe when something's meant to be, you lay it down and just see what happens. See if there's any momentum that can occur. It felt time. It felt like it was time. Like, okay, I've really pursued this thing and I've got to get something else going. So then I can circle back around. But I had not, my publishing deal had not renewed. I was working for a large tech company at the time and doing something totally outside of music and completely different.
Yeah.
And that's when it happened. I mean, it was just kind of wild how that happened.
Divine type of
timing. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll say it. Maybe it was just a coincidence or whatever. But
for sure,
yeah.
I personally don't think anything's coincidence. Chance or coincidence. I think everything's meant to happen when it does. It's either it's happening for you. It's just whether you're willing to see it.
Yeah, maybe both exist.
Yeah,
maybe it's both random and meant to be.
Yeah,
maybe both can exist simultaneously.
For sure.
Yeah,
I love that. You're gonna cry. So I don't know country music that well.
Yeah,
I listen to metal.
Yeah, cool.
Who's
your favorite metal bands?
Oh, I listen to a lot of black metal, like the stuff from like Europe and death metal bands. I
grew up, man. I was listening to, and okay, I'm dating myself here, but in the metal, but I was listening to Megadeth and Metallica and all that back in the day.
I was raised on all that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So and then it just got evolved.
Talk about great musicians and great singers. Crazy, just the talent. Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of things I think people discredit, especially with like a lot of the black metal bands or whatever. But there's you hear these harsh vocals and people just think that's screaming music.
Yeah.
And then I'll pull up a song and I'll be like, okay, read these lyrics.
Exactly.
And it's like poetic as can be.
It's art. They're expressing themselves. Yeah.
And then they're just, these guys are like music nerds, man. They are so extremely like
it was the marketing of the music that made it dangerous.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that because it sold a lot of records.
Well, yeah. I mean, it defies like the norm, right? That's what metal's about. It's about like going against everything else and just kind of creating this, you almost want it to look chaotic in a way or like uncomfortable.
Sure.
That's just part of the art, part of the expression. You get what I'm saying?
Totally.
You're in the music
performance
world.
Art.
Yeah, but I love it. So there's, I grew up on that stuff and it just evolved. And it's funny because my dad's in his 60s and like he'll send me black metal bands that he's like, have you heard this album? This is music nobody hears of, right? Around us. And it's something that we connect on as well.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a special thing,
Yeah.
And so I don't know, but So I didn't know the song Best Shot. I thought I knew it.
Yeah.
So my wife, I was like, yeah, he wrote the song Best Shot. And she's like, really? And I was like, yeah. So I started singing like, what's that song? Hit me with your best shot.
Oh yeah. That's 7. Yeah. I gotcha.
She was like, he wrote that? And I was like,
Yeah, I wish.
I was so certain, man. I was like singing it in the house. And she was like, Joe, that song's pretty old. Like, how old is he?
No, yeah, that wouldn't line up exactly.
And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, I've heard this song before.
Yeah.
It's just, that's like my misunderstanding of it. I thought it was so funny because I was like, man, maybe I should like play that song on like the speaker and while he's here. So that was just my, not quite understanding it right, but I think it's really cool, that that did happen on the timing. So I guess given that song blew up, right?
Yeah.
What would you say it means to you personally, and how did it influence your career moving ahead?
Well, it's interesting because, success, a lot of it, not only there is a lot of, as we know, well, we can just call it what it is. There's a lot of luck involved, right? I do think both exist. There's things are whimsical and random. Things are also meant to be. Oh, yeah. I really do believe that both can exist. Yeah. But it's also the timing in which it happens, because by the time that happened, I wasn't on Music Row every day. I was working in at a different company and figuring out what to do next. Then COVID happened, and that I think disrupted a lot of routines and structures for us all. But for me, I totally went very much introspective. I was like, wow, what does life mean? Because things got really quiet and still. And so while I was working for this large tech company, they offered a benefit to their employees. It was a mental health platform. It's a different one that I work for now, but I was assigned a coach to help me with the goals and just, anxiety and things of that nature. And I asked him, hey, how did you get into this? Because I thought, what a fun path it would be to just talk to different people and when it comes to religion, economically, when it comes to just all these races and genders and all these things. Like I just want something human. And I think that was when I was playing music. I mean, that was one of my main, what I was always trying to get to, is just something human that's going to make people feel something.
Yeah.
And I felt like when I was in these sessions with my coach virtually, I was like, this is very similar to co-writing, except we're just not talking about a song. We're talking about my life and what I want to do and things like that. And so he told me the training institute that he went through, and I just made note. I just basically modeled his steps and went through those same, got certified through the International Coaching Federation, and just went through his steps and then started my private practice, and then landed at the company I work for now. And I'm still able to play music. I mean, I played the Bluebird Cafe last month. I'm playing another round with some writers here in a couple weeks, and still, got a gig down towards the Atlanta area in July. So I'm still able to scratch that itch. I'm still able to, but it's of my choosing, and it's not like a grind, and it's truly something of just fulfillment and joy. And now that I get to do it, it's so special to me. And I still co-write on occasion in the evenings, when people want to get together and it makes sense, and still able to do that and, exercise that muscle. For sure. So I feel very fortunate that I have kind of like best of both worlds happening in my world right now, in my life.
So I was going to ask you what inspired the transition from, songwriting to more focused on mental health. Yeah. And obviously you told me that, and it's interesting you said COVID, because that was a negative experience for a lot of people. But I know I've actually spoken to a lot of people to where it changed a lot of theirs for the better. Like they found the opportunity in it. It's just like Rockefeller during the Depression, right? He found the opportunity and created what he did. So in tough
time to
times,
reinvent. It wasn't time. I think a lot of people had a chance to reinvent themselves.
Yes. Yeah. So that's what I saw for you, and it's a really cool thing. I don't know. There's a book called The Obstacle Is the Way.
Oh yeah, is that Ryan Holiday?
Yeah,
yeah. I've read Ego is the Enemy.
Yes,
and Stillness is the Way.
Okay, I haven't read those.
Yeah,
Are
they're
they
really
pretty good?
great. Yeah, and
Okay.
he has a podcast as well. I'm sure you know about that one.
Well, I mean, maybe you'll get you on it.
No, but do you listen to a lot of Stoicism and
I
you know?
do.
Yeah.
Well,
It's got a lot of good aspects.
yeah, it
To
started for me with like Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, totally.
Meditations.
Yeah.
That's what got me into that kind of reading and knowledge, because there's what's cool about it is this: you look at something, this guy's long gone,
Yes.
but there's so much value in his words today,
Yeah.
and that's what's really cool about it.
Well, it's fascinating to me that, sometimes we can elevate these people from thousands of years ago, and in going back, I think there's a thread in this conversation of just being human. I mean, yeah, the world looked vastly different back then.
Yeah.
As far as we know, and yet they're still living out a human experience that we're living out now, which is modern day technologies. And
Yeah, they were living it absent of everything that we have available to us.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the quote? They said the gods envy us. Do you remember that line?
No, I don't. But
long story short is the gods envy us because they're immortal, and like you're never more beautiful than you are now. Like, because we do eventually die, essentially, that the gods envy us because we are human. You know, they don't have the opportunity to feel the things we do. And it goes back to what you said earlier, like being less human.
Yeah.
Why? Because
it's only going to cause anguish.
It is. And the gods feel anguish because they're immortal, right? And so we get such a beautiful opportunity for however much time that we're blessed with to feel it all and experience it all. And that's like, I always try to push that to the world. It's so hard for people to grasp. But it's like, I found that to always be such a powerful line. And it goes back to the human aspect you've been discussing.
Yeah. Isn't there a phrase in Stoicism, memento mori?
Oh, yeah.
Remember death.
I got it tattooed on my neck.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But it is so, it's, and there again, that's something I think through religion, not all religions and not all people, but some people are so afraid of, when actually that's a part of humanness that is beautiful too, right?
Yeah.
Because then it allows us to go, everything is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing lasts forever. So when you think about reinventing yourself, when you think about all these different chapters of life, we can mourn what we talked about earlier about mourning who we thought we were or who we were at a particular time. But if you can remember memento mori, which is remember death, it's like, well, yeah, of course I'm different in certain ways than I was 5, 10, 15 years ago. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully. Or maybe that company closed, or you shared your story recently and how, what a lesson there, and how you're flourishing and finding opportunity in this time of transition. And nothing lasts forever. But I think there's this part of us that we get really sad, when things, relationships end, people pass on. It's not supposed to be something morbid. Is maybe can be something more beautiful if we can just embrace that human aspect of life.
Because it is a beautiful thing in a way. Like, I'm a huge Tolkien fan.
Yeah.
And I find people ask me like what kind of like entrepreneurship books I read, and I'm like, Lord of the Rings. Because
so it's funny. I was on a hike with a friend yesterday, and he said, "Have you ever read the Lord of the Rings?" And it was so it's just kind of cool. Because you're the second person in 2 days.
That's cool. There's something about that.
Yeah.
It is interesting because I find everything throughout that book, that story to be applicable to life.
Yeah.
Like Aragorn embodies like the ultimate masculine man and all his ways and traits. Like that's kind of like that almost that archetype you want to be as a man, right? In a lot of those ways. And then you look at the end, and they're at the very end. And the orcs are overrunning, and Pippin doesn't want to die. And Gandalf's like, death isn't the end. He said, after it's far green, it's white shores or far green country. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like the next layer is beautiful. And and like the way I look at death is like, yeah, it's sad when we lose others, but at the end of the day, like death is life again. just in a different sense that we don't understand yet until that time comes. But it's may not be the same as this. So embrace this and maximize it. And then that next step is a next journey.
Yeah. You know, acorn becomes an oak tree, right? You look to nature, things change form. You know, it makes you think, I mean, who knows what it'll be.
These are the kind of things I ponder on a lot.
Yeah. That's good stuff.
At the end of the day, I think I find a lot of stuff in that applicable, just like the words of the Stoics. And, you know, talked about memento mori and remembering death. And I think that's a thing so many people fear so much.
Yeah.
And they spend their life kind of fearful of that. And that's what I believe makes them want to get comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and also, and you know, these days for me, whatever someone, because I come from the Bible Belt, you know, I was raised in the South, and so, you know, raised in a Christian home. And I think that one thing that I'm not talking about anyone else who's a Christian, but one thing that I did when I was entrenched or didn't know, wasn't as open to other faiths or curious, it was a reason for me not to really worry about now. Like if paradise, and that's, you know, if that works for someone else to get them through the day, if paradise is down the road, you know, I was kind of more focused, more future focused and you're sort of taught that maybe living in the now is not such a good thing, or, you know, meditation even in certain Christian circles is thought of as not the way to go. And I think, man, prayer is meditative. I mean, it's all meditation, you know what I mean? But for me, it's you know, maybe heaven is out there, and that's great, you know, fantastic. You know, maybe it's that we move on to another plane or another, who knows? None of us know. But for me, you know, letting go of the certainty and leaning more into my faith, because to me, faith is not certainty. It's, you know, where I can read the words of Jesus, and I don't know. It's like it put me in touch with a higher power in a more authentic way, a more loving way. And certainty kind of, in this, I'm only speaking about myself, but certainty made me a jerk. I was kind of, I don't know, othering people who believe differently than me. And I can't go back to that. I mean, it's just too rigid.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that mindset. Yeah, it is.
But there again, if that's where someone's at, then by all means, you know, that's just not where I am.
That's their journey. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I totally respect that.
Of course. It's interesting you say that. You know, it's, people have asked me often, they're like, so you don't believe in like heaven and hell? I was like, well, I don't fear hell. I said, but at the end of the day, like, I just embrace that. Just like in life currently, I've had to embrace the unknown. And I know, like, when that time comes, I got to embrace the unknown, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
You know, because it's essentially, it's like I told my wife, because she is Christian.
Yeah.
And I was like, honey, like, all I know is that I had this time with y'all now. That's why I'm so fiery and so passionate.
Yes.
That's what I know is certain. While I'm here, this is real, and this is my time with y'all.
Yes.
Do I know if we'll be walking the golden streets or whatever one day? I don't.
I don't know.
All I know is
I'm
that
okay
I
with not knowing.
Now. Yeah, and that's okay. But, you know, all I know, say I am judged, say I'm wrong. You know, it's not, I truly believe it's not our words that are going to define what happens after. I think it's our actions throughout our life. How much love did we show? You know, how did we treat others? What is the impact we made? I think those are the things that speak for us spiritually more than anything.
Well, and you think about being human, right? We talk about being human. We talk about reality. You know, anytime I've tried to use, there again, a dream, a scripture, a substance to bend reality to me, it's never worked out well at all. You know? But it's what do I know is true and what I know is real? I know that me and my wife are together. We live, you know, in Green Hills in Nashville. You know, I mean, like, this is our time now together. That's all I know. That's all that's tangible to me. That's truth to me. It's so unknowable that it can just be exhausting for me anyway. And it caused a lot of anxiety, you know, thinking about, man, heaven and hell. I mean,
It's a tough choice.
And I love this conversation, and because I think it can make people feel uncomfortable, but I think that's how we grow, and is talk about things like this.
I'm grateful for the fact that you're willing to do so as well, and just
just kind of naturally went there. But
yeah, and that's, that's a cool thing too. Well, it's like I look at my daughter, right, and everything is. She's not thinking about the future. She's not thinking about what we're feeding her for dinner. She's not thinking about what sports she's going to play. I think about those things.
Yeah,
but like everything in her world is right in front of her. And like yesterday, we went to my wife's race, and I'm watching my daughter talking to somebody, and she's over in this gravel, and she's just like making circles with her arms, and just like she's covered in dust.
Mm-hmm.
And I look over, and I'm like, well, she's right there. I got an extra pair of clothes.
Yeah.
She's just enjoying rocks and stuff.
Absolutely. Well, don't you wish we could hold on to that?
Yeah, but I think, it's trying to know things that kind of pull us away from that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That innocence of that presence, because presence is very powerful.
Yeah.
It's hard because personally for me as a father and a husband, like I got to think ahead because I got to take care of her. I got to nurture her. I got to provide for them.
Yeah.
So that's a difficult line of which I'm still trying to understand. But, at the end of the day, like, I don't know, as the more I've uncovered about myself, especially recently, I've been able to just be more in the moment.
Yeah.
And less thinking about all that, because that it does become overwhelming. And maybe that's why things just become comfortable for people as well.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah. Well, our brains, they say, we're always, my brain is, if my biology and science and all that kind of stuff is correct, it's always trying to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and be efficient. Mm. So, religion does that for people. It gives us certainty. I mean, back thousands of years ago, it was thundering. Well, God's angry. So we have to make sense. We're all through, I believe, all of us are just trying to make sense of the world. Yeah. That's all we're trying to do. And and certainty makes people feel grounded, and makes people feel good. So by all means, it's just for me, I just couldn't, I just took a different path that felt more resonant.
Yeah.
For just my individual path. And that doesn't mean that I've turned my back on God. It means actually I feel like in a lot of ways I've embraced maybe more of a something more authentic and something more feels more real to me than what I was raised on, which I think gave me a lot of good things. How I was raised, when you think about just how to treat people, there's a lot of good things that came out of that season of my life, that I don't regret. But just you gotta hopefully we keep growing.
Exactly. You talk about the turning your back, and a lot of people may think in some way I've done that if they're really very rigid, but have I? I think,
who says?
Yeah, exactly. To me, like I'm closer to God than I ever thought imagined I'd be.
Yeah.
I was on the life flight after my motorcycle wreck to Vanderbilt, and I had a moment with God, right? Or the gods, right? But it's all part of one. And it brought me closer, and it gave me more purpose and gave me more fire, and it made me better as an individual. Wow. And it filled my heart with more love and all these things that are universal across a lot of different, belief type systems, right? So I wouldn't say I turned my back on God essentially, but it just depends on how, I guess rigid people want to get with terms and labels, right? But I feel closer, and at the end of the day, that's what I have. I'm not here to prove it to anybody else. I know what's right for me and in my heart, and I'm good there.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I embrace people that maybe connect differently than I do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's that mutual respect thing too. Like your perspective, I love it so much, and I appreciate that about you.
Vice versa.
Yeah. So it's really cool.
Because we're like, we talked about when we first arrived, we may not agree on everything, and that's totally fine. But it's almost like we've come to this place where if I disagree with you, I'm somehow an enemy, or vice versa. Yeah. And I wish, when I was in school, back in my day, when I was in school, people wanted to learn how to debate. So you would actually take on a different point of view that even you didn't believe in, but just learn how to debate against another point of view. and talking and having discussions. And I believe things have gotten so polarized that, there's a lot of reasons we could get into. I'm sure we don't have time, but, I think gathering like what we're doing right now, just that's where I'm at now. I want more in-person, real experiences. Online's fine, but
yeah,
we need that as a tool, but the tangible, real, sober reality, man, I'm all about it. Bring it on,
Well, it's just like we talked about originally. You're, doing the virtual, and I was like, I just really want to do it in person. But now, like, you probably see why.
Of course,
the conversation would have been totally different.
Oh yeah. No.
And so, like, now that we're here face to face, I'm like, yes, I'm so glad. Like,
me too.
Things fell in the way they did.
Me too.
Now we could you could shoot me a text after this anytime.
Yes.
What's up, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, we built that relationship and trust through this opportunity, and I think it's a really cool,
that's what it's
beautiful
all about.
thing. Yeah. I do got a couple questions, and I wonder, what do you think, how would you define success today as opposed to early in like your career maybe?
Wow. That's an interesting question. How would I define success today than when I was younger? Mm-hmm. I feel like relationships are so important, not just family relationships, but just building relationships and community with others. If you have the freedom to find more environments where things are more in line with your values, and I believe that's super important to me, like a community of people where the values are in alignment, and I don't have to be anything other than myself. But I do think that, building relationships, how I treat my wife, and I think having the freedom to put myself in uncomfortable situations, the right kind of discomfort in life is so key. And I think, self-agency, if I can hold on to my self-agency, to me, that's a sign of success. Because, there was a point of time where I would sign something and, due to the business that maybe I was, or the circle I was in, like me giving up my self-agency benefited the other party. That can happen on occasion, and so for me, it's like self-agency is so huge. And so, and then, I think the discomfort is so huge, because I want that resistance in my life. I went to South Dakota on a whim for an adaptive cross-country ski trip back in January.
Cool.
So just constantly put myself in those types of situations, and to have the means to do that.
Yeah.
I think that, to me, spells out success, and just doing things creative. It doesn't have to be songwriting. I mean, I want music to be an aspect of my life always, but when I can make music with people that I like and that support me as well, that's a sign of success. And so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's like, I mean, it's amazing answer. Yeah. Thank you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You covered so much there. I love it. That's awesome.
Self-agency is a big one in this point of my life, and if I feel like that's being tampered with, I run.
That's interesting too, because I don't hear that term brought up often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of situations, not just business-wise, but, religious, all kinds of things that if we're not careful, there may be, we're giving up part of our self-agency and giving up our ability to choose and make decisions. And that, I don't want that for myself. So that's a core value for me.
Yeah. Like learning how to take risks, but also being analytical going into it, not just jumping head first with no thought, because you get yourself in a bad spot.
Sure.
But being able to check it out and assess those risks properly. But,
and be willing to be wrong. Like it's okay if I'm, if I wasn't right in this particular, if that makes any sense. Like, I was wrong about this, so I'm going to go do something else rather than, I'm going to just keep going and grit my teeth, and it's okay to be wrong and try new things.
Just like taking a risk, like it frees you, but it also isn't comfortable. So
Yeah.
I think that applies to everything.
Yeah.
Now for you, what would you say is the legacy that you're most intentionally building moving forward?
Man.
Not just professionally, but just as a human.
Wow, I don't know. I used to think about that, like life purpose and legacy. Kind of, it was very kind of lofty.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest with you, I mean, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier when I said my perception of myself is probably very different than whether my wife sees me, that my friends see me. Those two things can be very different.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like I have that much control over that. All I know is just get up every day and do something useful and work. And I'm a big believer in 1 degree turns.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever my legacy is, that's kind of, I don't know. I've kind of let that go.
Yeah.
Actually, because
Really
I
cool.
don't know.
It's okay.
know.
You're just, well, maybe it's probably in some ways good not to think about it. Just do your best. And whatever comes from that as your legacy is what's meant to be in anyways. Yeah,
absolutely. And, I think I really don't have control over that narrative, really. All I can do is learn and try to do better and just keep walking towards acceptance and self-agency.
Really cool. Really cool. Yeah, thanks for that. The 4 agreements would be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally.
I like that one. That's a good one.
Don't make assumptions.
Ooh,
yeah. And then always do your best.
That's great. What a simple, but don't make assumptions. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier about certainty and how I feel like certainty made me a jerk in certain ways. Yeah. Maybe just internally, if it wasn't visible to others, maybe it was, but I just feel like I was kind of a jerk back then when I was just so certain.
You made assumptions about maybe how others would be given they believed in this or that.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
but don't take anything personally. I love that one because that makes life very neutral. Mm-hmm. You could just go through life and, because who knows what someone else is thinking.
What's their experience? Like what's their experience?
What lens are they looking through?
A lot of times the things we say are often a reflection.
Totally.
So maybe they said this to me, but where does that stem from? Is it about them?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we say things to others, especially when it comes to a negative light, or we make things personal, I've had to learn to look at everybody around me, even those that have done me wrong, as a mirror. Because how have I reacted to them, what they've done or said or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn that, all I got to do, instead of getting upset, I got to look at them as a mirror, because then I can be grateful for them. Okay, absolutely. What did they show me within myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't take away the fact that they did this or that, but what is there to learn about myself to improve?
Yeah.
So in that, if you look at everything through that lens, you can almost find gratitude in everybody in your life to a degree, right? And that's a pretty cool thing to be able to do that. I talked about what I went through when I was a child.
Yeah.
It's been... Yeah, it's not, there's never an excuse for anybody to go through anything like that.
No, I understand.
But at the end of the day, what am I learning about myself now? And how can I apply that to the rest of my life, and also to raising my daughter and to helping others in the world, right? So there's something, there's
your
gold.
Response to it is what?
Yes. Finding value in the impossible, right? Pulling purpose from pain or meaning from pain, and finding that gold within it. That's the key. Because we don't control a lot of situations, but we control how we react to them and what we take from them.
Yeah, somebody told me, they said acceptance is taking radical responsibility for what happened to us, even when it isn't our fault.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing.
And it's confusing, right? Because you're right, it's not condoning. It's just saying, that what happened to me, what happened to you, what happened to everyone, it's not our fault. But how we respond to it is key.
Exactly. Because I don't see people as inherently evil. I think everybody's born like in a way pure. But I think over time, the experiences and circumstances of what we're born into obviously shift that, right? Yeah. So you can learn how to be like, okay, that happened to me. This person's, that wasn't a good thing they did. And that was evil, right?
Yeah.
But like, okay, what led them to that?
What happened to them?
They were broken.
Yeah.
And that's that's a crazy thing, because you're able to show your shadows compassion.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of power in that too. And it's not necessarily making excuses for people, but the point is to give power back to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I won't make excuses for certain actions done ever.
Yeah.
You know, like that's wrong 100%. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that does stem from something.
Yeah.
And you're able to show them compassion in that way, and bring something back to yourself. Does it make sense?
Yeah, totally. Well, there's a James Stockdale quote that I love. He was a prisoner of war.
Okay.
And it goes something like this, you know, you must never confuse faith that you'll prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be.
Yeah.
And that's how he survived.
Interesting. That's
being
really
a prisoner of war. You know, because he was like, I got to accept that I'm here, you know, and I will prevail. I will prevail. I will get out of here. But if I don't accept my reality right now, it's not going to go well, you know.
Wow. Yeah,
and
that's
that really
powerful.
Powerful, yeah.
I mean, and most of us aren't going to face things like that, you know, to that degree, right? Well, just like my friend Rick I told you about, you know, what he went through. Most of us aren't going to face the loss of a child in that way.
Yeah.
But he experienced it so he could teach us how to forgive even the minor things. You know, that's what I take from it.
Yeah.
And for me in my life, there's another phrase too called amor fati. And basically essentially means that everything in life happens is either good or necessary. Yeah. So you eliminate the bad from the thoughts because you're focused on that. Well, then, you know, there's those repercussions. But if you can at least see everything as necessary, then you can dive deeper into it and find that gold we talked about. Anyways.
No, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm so fired up. You got me pumped up, JP. Like,
I love it. I love it. That's great.
But anyways, so, you know, as we close out here, I got a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
First, real quick, because I don't want to leave her out. Your wife and her influence in your life. And, you know, obviously when y'all met, but yeah, how is she, what is the impact she's made?
You know, it's wild. So we met in 2006. I was hired to play in the studio for her.
Okay.
And she wrote a song for a corporate client. She was producing a corporate video for one of her main clients, and that's how we met. And it's kind of it was sort of love at first sight. No pun intended, you know. But we met and just clicked. It was just like...
I just got that, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. It was like we've just always been together, you know, and how we've grown together, I would say, in the last 10 years is pretty amazing. It's such a gift.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of ways in which we feel or believe spiritually, politically, that we came to it individually, but also together, and to actually be of like mind in these deep core when it comes to these deep core aspects of life is a real gift.
Yeah.
So, you know, her support.
So you may think maybe you're on the surface level, like y'all might have different views on certain things.
Yeah,
but on
like
the deeper level.
Yeah, because we were both there again, you know, raised in more religious, more rigid environments.
Yeah.
More so her than myself. But, you know, politically, again, when it comes to religion, all across the board. I mean, we both kind of went through a reconstruction, I like to call it, together. And that's tough, because if one part of the unit is saying, you know, I'm still going to hang on to this, and the other person is saying, well, I think I want to let that go, that can be challenging.
Yeah.
So I feel very grateful, very thankful that we've just naturally grown together.
That's really cool.
Which is really huge. A definite gift in my life. Yeah.
Man, well, thank you for sharing that.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think I got might have to finish with this last question, my friend.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say? Obviously, you want to, you know, let everybody know where to find you and all that good stuff. But is there anything you really want to hit on before I ask the final question?
I think we've hit on so many things. I've loved this conversation. I really appreciate you having me in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if people are interested, they can go to jpwilliams.net, and also I'm on Instagram. It's at blindmangram, like Instagram on that platform. Yeah, I mean, I've still put out music every now and then. So, JP Williams on Spotify or Apple Music, that kind of thing. And we actually did a podcast. We did like 20 some odd episodes together about a couple of years ago called the Blonde Leading the Blind podcast. So,
I love it.
And it's like personal development, and each episode is only like 10 minutes, just to sort of talk about our businesses and kind of a lot of the things we talked about today.
Really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe you'll reignite that. And,
yeah, you never know.
Because there's a lot of things I want to hear about,
Yeah.
Maybe hopefully we'll reconvene one of these days. I'd like to hear more as more opportunities come, because there's so much to talk about, like your mental health coaching and a lot of things intertwined there. And then obviously speaking to people in public, like we could dive into a lot of these aspects and the things that come along with them, but we'd have to reserve another couple hours.
This has been great, though. It's flown by.
Oh, yeah. But based off of this, I think that would make a great one, too. So, I'll be here for a while, and I know you will be.
Yeah.
And I just look forward to what's ahead. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And continued success to you as well, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, JP.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yep.
What is your relentless pursuit?
Wow. Relentless pursuit. Something human. Yeah, something human.
That's it?
That's it.
Man, that's perfect. There's nothing else that needs to be said. So, yes, that was probably the quickest answer I've gotten with that. But also, it's crazy how much can be packed into 2 words.
Yeah.
Just like relentless pursuit. So,
absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, JP, thank you. And, I'm going to stick my hand out to shake your hand, because I shake every guest hand.
Yeah, brother.
So,
yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an honor. And until next time.
Okay, man.
All right, guys. Thank you. Heck yeah.